Okay, so hope you're all well. Welcome to our Thursday call. Amazing always to be here with you. I'm excited about today, also quite terrified. I'm going to cover some new ground, which is also quite ancient. So let's keep this loose. We don't know how this is going to go. I made a prezi. I don't want to take too much time on it. I'd like to keep this conversational, and then we can decide if we should do a process with this. I think what is important is something comes clear. So, for those who weren't in yesterday's call, we're going to be banking upon what was discussed yesterday. Just to say, this is kind of independent yet quite corollary or complementary to what was discussed yesterday. It's always new perspectives in the same thing. We're always talking about the same thing, aren't we? But it's always different. So I think in general, what's interesting is how do we frame things. We're learning to understand the difference between the framework and the theory, the philosophy and the theory, and the practice. So when you enter a room, there's always like, how do you hold the frame? The frame could be the medium could be the environment could be the ecosystem. Each of these could hold like a certain rhythm, and if you know where you're coming from, each ecosystem is complete in and of itself. So sometimes you would be speaking to the frame that exists in the room. You won't just coming from your own frame, and you're developing a heightened sensitivity as to what do people believe in, what are they holding that might be undergoing a transformation. You're not just going to impose your own space. So when I hold my own work, I often ask similar questions within the process itself. I would ask, how old are you? I find those questions really interesting. How long have you been here? How long have you been doing this? Where have you been? What did you look like before you came here? What would you look like after you're done with here? And all of those have something to do with dimensionality and time and space. I find that these questions bring about some level of objectivity that brings people outside of just their own story, their own continuity. They would still look at their own story, but from the point of view of something much more vast and bigger. They wouldn't go so much just into taking things personally. They might go into a witnessing or a process of observation. So I think one of the simplest ways to go into this is to understand what are people holding in the heart space, which is also a sense of the middle. What's their center? What's the core, the heart? We can't take things for granted that most people have the same centrism. So let's look at maybe historically what have been the centrisms that have held perspectives and frameworks and paradigms in the world. Maybe when we weren't really traveling across this large energy ball we call the Earth, we might have had centrisms that were simpler. Let me give you an example. So when we maybe explored the Earth and we decided that the Earth is in the middle of the whole universe. Yeah. Oh, I'm not sharing. Sorry. should be. You guys need to remind me sometimes. I'm glad there's people in the room who can notice that. Um, yeah. So then we might call it a geocentric model if the Earth was in the middle of the space. If it was not the Earth that's in the middle of the space, say we came into the Copernican revolution where the Earth is revolving around what's in the middle. We thought the sun was in the middle, then we believed in a heliocentric model of cosmic. When you think of a theocentric model, then what's in the middle would be God. And then I think we, for a long time, experimented with the anthropos, being man is the one in the middle of the universe. What's interesting with the current sciences, especially the quantum science, is that we're starting to think of what it means that everything is the middle, that we live in an omni-centric universe. So I think whatever people hold as the center becomes their own centrism, and so much of your reality will be geographically centered around what is the heart? What is the heart for you? So I think when you enter a room, you need to determine what is the middle here. What is my middle today, right now, this hour? And what is the middle of the people who are coming? What is the middle of the shared space? And that would determine so much of what time and space would mean. So a lot of people might be more into Indian centrism or the Chinese tradition, Greek tradition, the Western tradition. I was looking at something interesting today. For example, I was Googling, there's this debate on the creationism versus evolutionist debate. But I Google this. The Earth is 6,000 years. And then I open this one. And no, actually, not this one. Let's go to Wikipedia. There's this movement called Young Earth Creationism. And without holding any judgment or any bias, internet's slow. This is interesting. A lot of people believe that the Earth is 6,000 and 10,000, between 6,000 and 10,000 years. Oh, sorry. I'm not sharing. Yeah, so there are people who believe that the Earth is between 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And there's a whole reason for this, that each... Huh? They're saying the sound is bad. How is it now? It's better. Okay, so it says here that about a 2017 survey determined that 38% of adults in the United States believe that God created humans in the present form at one time in the last 10,000 years. And I'm withholding or suspending my judgment. I'm coming from a space where I don't take a stand on how old is the Earth. From what I know from a personal perspective, traveling across the island of Palawan, there are actually many communities here in the island that believe the same. And this is what they're taught. There are teachers who are anti-science who would state that, you shouldn't believe what the books are saying because according to the gospel, according to the book of Genesis, this is the truth. So um, there are students who aren't actually allowed to look at the other perspective. So there's more of a creationism in the traditional places in some of these parts of the world, which to us are quite close. So then that's why I do find centrisms to be important. And this is not something just to reflect upon others. Like for you, how do you hold your center? What do you believe is your heart, your core, or your center, or your middle? And then how do you formulate a theory of creation or evolution of space and time upon that? And then as you come into something like the inner dance, how does that actually influence your understanding? So this might seem so abstract and theoretical, but I do want you to consider this when you enter the space and begin to hold it, to have empathy for how people are holding the construct. What do they see? What do they believe in? And then taking that further beyond just maybe the cultural or historical space for parents, for example, who are holding young children, what does time and space look for them who have not yet been introduced to the understanding that the earth is either 6,000 years old or 4,000, no, 4 billion years old. So I think the earth is coming at a crossroads and we have to recognize that this is a fact. Like whether you come into this from a scientific or a spiritual pathway, the earth is actually conglomerating these many different time scales. Um, and if you're going to hold, whether it be inner dance or the psychedelic journey or breath work, when you bring people into experience, they will journey into this. So depending on the words you're using, depending on how you hold the frame, this is what they will enter. And everything that you hold, from the music to the way you touch, the way you use words, everything will influence. So I want to then go into a short resi today on the nature of this. I'm going to go into maybe guidelines presented by one of my favorite deep thinkers. Her name's Catherine Malabou, who wrote an essay and presented a talk on what she called the brain of history. Catherine Malabou, I feel, is one of the deepest thinkers in the world. She worked with Jacques Derrida, the founder of deconstruction, up to his last years, and she probably took over a lot of his work and brought it into states of embodiment, which is very inner dancey. She is known as the philosopher of neuroplasticity or plasticity itself. I actually was in correspondence with her in 2018, and I asked her, would you write the foreword on the book on inner dance that's being written by Dr. Peter Riksha? And she actually said yes. So I haven't gone back to her since 2018. For those who go deep into not just inner dance, but frameworks around inner dance, which could include especially psychedelics, there's something about the very talk that I mentioned that I would love for you to explore. And I can send a copy of that after this Zoom. It's called The Brain of History, where she brings up two thinkers, Deepesh Chakrabarty and Daniel Schmale, who are taking different standpoints on time and space. So for now, let's look at the concept of the Anthropocene. What is that? Um, let's keep going into Google. Um, what is a geological age? I think that's the entry point. Um, with some images. So a geological age is time scale that talks about this is better the biography of the Earth. What does the Earth look like if it was a person that had a lifespan? And this is us. We belong to the Holocene, which is roughly from 10,000 years past into the present, when agriculture became a practice. So the Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch based upon this understanding that we have impacted the Earth so much that we constitute our own epoch. So this is being debated. Um, are we significant enough, despite that we have not really been on Earth as a modern human species for that long, to constitute one of these, a lot of which lasted for millions or at the very least hundreds of thousands or dozens of thousands of years. So I think this is important because it will alter our centrism hugely, and it will trigger how do we see the human? Don't exactly know what's in here. The Anthropocene signals the becoming Earth of the human, for one. You hear this often. You would hear this if you keep holding the space that you do and you're holding it intensely. You'll hear people say, I don't know why or how, but I became the Earth. I became the Earth. So if you look at my own story of living with the Earth in solitude for a duration, innerdance for me was a product of becoming the Earth. And when I shared this with the world, I was sharing this vibration that's coming from the Earth, which is stating that um, we're becoming the Earth. Now we want to understand what does that actually mean that we're becoming the Earth. We're more used to the anthropomorphic system of the Earth is becoming human. We like to think of the human as the mother, say she's the mother, so we personify the Earth. But what does it mean that we can do the opposite, that we can understand the human as the Earth? So there's something happening there where the human being starts to mediate nature and history itself, because we're becoming powerful in this way that not only is Earth altering the human being, which was the old belief, but somehow realizing that we're it's shifted. We're altering the Earth, um, and that could be huge. That could be disastrous, or that could also be life changing. So there's definitely something in the human spiritual awakening that needs to conjoin with this decision making process. The Anthropocene hasn't been formalized yet, but the working group on the Anthropocene, the WGNA, have put forward um, many foundations that makes this quite near already. And there will be a lot of consequences once that is, I think, decided upon. So let's go into these slides. This is the main thing, the main issue, the main content there. The human is becoming a geological force. What does that mean? Isomorphy describes a possible structural sameness, which between humanity and geology doesn't make sense. How does the human actually become geological? How does a human being become like a mountain or a stone or a glacier? There's not an ontological sameness there. There's a rupture or a break between humanity and geology. So the Anthropocene moment is being seen as this possible bridge, so that suddenly if we became an epoch on our own, where the dinosaurs hold their own epoch, which is the Jurassic Age, and so forth, we become powerful, like in that way, and thus we become geological. Are we ready for that? Um, Part of what would bring that about is we would enjoy a neutral inorganic power. What does that actually mean? Our consciousness would be suspended, and that includes emotional states such as guilt. So, you know how you would um, hear all these things about how we're destroying the planet, where we're burning these forests, and we're bringing about all this pollution, we're overpopulating, how much of the rainforest is left, and the Arctic ice caps are melting, and so on and so forth. And you somehow feel helpless because what do you do? Are you actually guilty? Are you responsible? How much can 1 out of 8 billion people do in order to help? So, according to the deep thinker Dipesh Chakrabarty, who wrote a thesis called, um, actually, it's four theses, he points out that the Anthropocene moment signifies that the human would not exactly be guilty. We would be more of an inorganic power because we're becoming the earth. I invite you to look deeper into this. I would share the Malibu talk, which is really good opening. I speak this from experience because I've heard people come from this suspension of guilt. So in a way, it's still connected to what we were talking about yesterday. We would cancel out the illusory nature of the external world where, when you die, what happens to the planet anyway? Does it become vibration? Does it all just disappear and you just have that one life and then you go into other worlds and so on and so forth? What do you believe? What do you know? Do you actually come back here and enjoy the same planet within a continuity of what you have created from past lives? Um, Again, I will not take a stand on what is true and what is not true. You would find different truth conditions depending on the lens that you're looking from. Um, so this is one stand on the Anthropocene issue, and there are other ways of looking at it. Um, this is the other stand, which almost runs polar, and the representation that Malibu brings up is from a Harvard historian called Lord Daniel Schmale, and he believes that. Wait, oh, there should have been something there. Let me just explain it then. He believes that there is no separation. You cannot separate the earth from the human. Um, the earth as a construct is embodied and embedded, and somehow we there's a connection there. There's a connection between what we think and what we speak and what we do that has to be in relationship always with the environment where the doing, the speaking, the thinking is coming from. And where that conjoins with the innerdance, Daniel Schmale has a really interesting theory on addiction. Based on what he believes, human addictions have these consequences. Going back into cause and effect, which we brought up yesterday, human addictions have evolutionary historical effects or consequences, both in the negative and the positive way of looking at things. And what I like about Schmale's theory is that he just look at addiction from how we normally see addiction, which would be like drugs and um, substance. For him, almost everything has a possible addictive set of possibilities. So let's leave that for now. Um, and he calls it psychotropic. Psychotropic could be substance psychotropic could be a habit, it could be something that you do. Psychotropism, I think, is what he calls it. Um, when I read this, and I live in Southeast Asia, what I like to think about is what is the psychology of the tropical, as opposed to the temperate, because plants here grow just like mushrooms and many other plants that bring about psychotropic effects. And for that reason, innerdance comes from the tropics. When people receive that, there is something from this part of the earth that's speaking that's psychotropic. Um, I think losing some text, but we're supposed to jump into these anyway. The old definition of addiction is not how we um, used to know it from the Roman sense. Addiction is defined as the state of being bound or enslaved. So addictus is in fact a character in Roman myth who was bound in chains, and even when he was freed up, he was so used to wearing these chains that he couldn't let them go. So addiction, in a way, is about being imprisoned, being bound up, being enslaved somehow. So some of the older definitions is addiction was in fact uh, this idea of debt, to be indebted, to owe, or to be obliged to someone. It was only later where addiction became a terminology that describes substance abuse, attachment to certain things. So that's why, according to Schmale, um, uh, that could be a psychotropic mechanism. Addiction isn't just pleasure. It could also be an addiction to this, and especially how medieval systems were controlled by the powers that be through death scenarios. People actually were not used to being free, to be liberated. They were used to being indebted somehow, either to the devil, either to God, either to a master, in a way that we're still finding a way to free ourselves from this. Um, so we take this up a lot in inner dance. We looked at hormones, neurotransmitters like dopamine, cortisol. Mood altering substances have a history. Very interesting how, especially in the 17th and 18th century, when colonization was happening, and all of these substances were making their way from the Americas, from Africa, from India into Europe. Cacao from Latin America, rum from Brazil, caffeine from Turkey, spices from India, tobacco from the Americas um, and parts of Asia. Something was happening to the brain of people. Something was happening to the brain of especially Westerners who had not yet tried out the psychotropic mechanisms that could alter states of consciousness. Beyond that, prior to this, ritual was in fact, in the medieval times, the primary mode of um, al- alteration of consciousness. So when you think of medieval sermons, for example, and we didn't have huge speaker systems that could amplify the voice of the preacher, there could be hundreds of thousands of people in the space, and people would describe so much emotion happening there, where there would be like sobs, crying, tears, screaming. So even though they weren't hearing the content, sermons in medieval times were quite psychotropic in nature, where there was something about the group energy that created a kind of tribalism that were holding a heightened state of awareness. And so what was interesting was when the West started to be introduced to a lot of these mood altering substances at the same time that the monarchic um, systems were giving way to more democratic systems, people stopped, there was a decline in the attendance of rituals like these, and more and more people were going into um, mood alteration um, in a different way, like from different dimensionalities, whatever that would hold. Like let we need to ask, what is that doing to the minds of people, and how was that coordinated somehow with everything else that was taking place in history? So psychotropism, yeah. Wait, so I think I need to press escape too. So teletropic mechanisms are, oh, yeah, something happened. Just describe it. Teletropic mechanisms would be the ability to alter the mood of others. So when ritual was more of the psychotropic mechanism, teletropic mechanisms were more religious in nature, so that what we were practicing was this ability to work on the the expansion of the consciousness of others, and that's a way of controlling people either through stress or rewards systems. And somehow, when we discovered substance, there was an alteration of um, alteration itself. We moved from teletropic to autotropic mechanisms, and autotropic mechanisms are more of, oops, it's that water sound. The alteration of one's mood, as opposed to maybe there's something here. The the alteration of the mood of others. Okay, so this is new. We're seeing that this is a 200 or 300-year old um, innovation, which prior to that, this was the norm. We belonged more to collectivist tribal systems where chants, where rituals were enough to hold a space. Like sermon was enough to hold a space. But as we started to individuate and we started to become interested in um, the causality of the one, autotropic mechanisms started to take over. So inner dance, in a way, holds both. When you think about it, like it holds autotropic mechanisms where we are learning how to bring about the expansion of one's own consciousness, but at the same time, we can see the social aspect of what it means to raise up the vibration of the soul group. Um, yeah, so one interesting thinker that then Malibu brings up is Marshall McLuhan, who talks about media a lot. We actually just acquired one of his books last week, Understanding Media, and by coincidence, this is the book that Catherine Malabou refers to in the essay or talk that we're referring to now. So a lot of you know Narcissus. He was the one who fell in love with his image in the water, and he died just forgetting that there was anything other than his own image. He didn't love himself, he fell in love with his own image. So there's, according to McLuhan, a kind of narcosis or a kind of numbness. The literal meaning of narcosis is to numb oneself. And for Marshall McLuhan, uh, everything, the text is lost. That is something that tends to happen when we extend our self across time and space. Something happens when we enter into different mediums where there's a kind of shock. So I don't know what it was like when we first acquired the internet or when we first acquired television, the radio, cinema, and everything else could be a media. Like a certain substance could be a medium, and then when we enter that medium, something takes place so that we extend a part of ourselves, so that something could be looked at. So there's something disastrous yet opportunistic within the narcosis, because it actually creates a possible way of looking at things that we can't achieve when we're within what is just identifying um, in what we're inside. Um, McLuhan points out that we are servants of the medium. To use any extension of ourselves in any technological form is to embrace it. To accept it puts us in a subliminal awareness. In a way, making these objects kind of gods or minor religions, where we become the servants of the television, or the servants of language, the servants of music, where in a way what we're speaking and what we're expressing is so much older than us. And in this way, um, we're being used by the medium much more than we're using it. Um, an effect of that is our central nervous system, and inner dance is more the peripheral nervous system, becomes extended and exposed, and in so doing, there's an awareness that comes with that. We start to look at things from a meta perspective. We become aware of our own consciousness. To give an example, when the printing press was coming out of Germany or Europe in the 16th century, when we learned how to read in print, not just in scribal writing, something happened where we became interested in meaning. Prior to the age of reading and writing, we weren't so interested in meaning because we haven't yet gone into abstract extension. We were pretty much identifying with the sound of the spoken word, and then there was something about landing in more abstract realities that allowed us to see more dimensions, like in a way. So when we cross different dimensionalities, there's own awareness that comes with that. So those who are in the forefront of coming to the edge of mediums, coming to the edge of dimensions, spending time um, at the uncomfortable spaces, you're bound to see many things that people will not always be aware of when they're in the middle or at the center of things. Um, so in this way, we become aware of inner dance as a kind of medium unto itself. I hid some things here. Not, not that one. Let's see. I really don't want to talk that much. I think I embedded like things here that would be helpful. It just guides my own head. Um, I think what Daniel Schmale is trying to convey within his book Deep History is addiction is a necessary mechanism that allows humans to interact with the earth. And psychotropic mechanisms have been there since the beginning of, of our time here, since the origins of life. So that, like addictions don't have to be negative in connotation. Um, you can get addicted to a vibration. You can get addicted to a sound. You can get addicted to to vegetarian food. You can get addicted to love. You can get addicted to life. So there's something about what we've been mapping out that combines stress and reward systems that looks at addiction from the simultaneous co-activation of the negative and the positive, and the present and the absent. So um, I guess that's it. I don't want to talk too much because I want to go more into a dialogue. The dialogue I would like to look at would be, how do you hold time? How do we hold the aspect of time? How do we hold centrism in the inner dance process? What are techniques? What are tools that we can hold that determines where we go when we go there? And I want to take this beyond just inner dance, especially inner dance through me. So a lot of the work that you've been doing holds a lot of ground, whatever it may be. How do you hold the scale? You know, how do you hold dimensionality? How do you hold continuity, circularity? I can imagine what might have happened to the human mind when we approached December 21, 2012. So people who were not from South America were still looking at the end of the Mayan calendar, which describes circular time that is not like Gregorian time. What did that mean to us that that happened in our lifetime? That probably one of the most advanced civilizations determined that there's something that ends in a linear fashion. It happened exactly. Oh wow! It's December 8th. No, it's December 15th. That's exactly 10 years ago. On December 21. Amazing. Oh, my video is off. Yeah. It's not interesting, right? Like exactly 10 years from now to the week, um, that something ended. So the first decade just passed. What happened? Did something slow down? Did something speed up? Um, or was it both? And why is it that a day today isn't like a day 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Um, yeah, so I'll open the space. If you had experiences of this, someone said something, or you said something, and that caused something in the room that determined where people went. What is your experience of this? I'm interested. Yeah. Okay. Wait, nada. Wait. Let me see the chat. Um, Otherwise, you could do an inner dance, and then we could see where that takes us, and that could be our sharing. So if you're in agreement, maybe we can take a 5 minute break, and if you could maybe prepare your space and take time and space with you. We'll see you on the other side. So 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Hi. So we can start. Welcome back, journey. I showed a bit of the video here. Take your time. Come back. You can feel your space, your body. And we're gonna open the space for sharing, for questions also. If you feel like finding words, we can share. And for those of you that are still slowly coming up, take your time.
Hi, Fanny. It's Melba. I had posted in the chat before we started a question, or I guess my comments on time. I wasn't sure. I didn't really pick up on what Pi was talking about 10 years ago. Do you know what he was talking about?
10 years ago. It was was it the big Maya calendar, 2012, that the Maya calendar was ending, and we thought there was the belief that it was the end of the world,
Okay.
because the Mayan calendar had dates until 2012, and then there was this kind of suspicion, a bit like when we turned the year 2000, and then this was more like technical, but the computers were not prepared to change like all the digits this way. So a lot of people took out their money in the banks, from the banks.
Mm-hmm.
But the Maya calendar holds more something like belief system and spiritual, like understanding of where the space is at. So now we're still 10 years after, and we're still here. So that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I could share a little bit about my experience. Right now, I had this feeling of really floating away, a lot of explosions, like as if there were like a lot of boxes, and you get out of every box again into a new, bigger dimension. And then there would come another dimension, and I would be like entering all the time, like getting out of the smaller box and going into a bigger one, and a bigger one, and a bigger one, and a bigger one. And this feeling of like that there's no gravity, floating away, as I said before. I could feel the sense of like being in that space of that there is no time and no space, and that you are just there and everywhere, and that everything happens at the same time. A lot of different perspectives also on Earth experience, like from above. I had a perspective of being the wind and seeing everything happening and like moving as the wind, where you don't have a physical body and you're just there, being space, actually. That's what I can remember, and the words that I can give to it now, because it's like a lot, and they're still coming back pieces of what I've been experiencing right now. But this is it, what I can share for now.
I can share. I'm still a bit spacing. I went somewhere where I don't know anything, unlearned everything. It was Leslie that was speaking, right? It felt similar to what you said. There was this challenge, meeting of death, and it's kind of the biggest fear that I've been looking at for a long time. And there was the infinity movement. It's been happening last couple of 2 months. I'd say that my head starts going, and from the nose, the movement of the infinity or circles. And now my eyes from the inside, like my eyes were making this movement. And yeah, I kind of met with death, and I invited myself to go through and let go of anything and unlearn all that I know and don't know anything. And then there was just space, and up till some point I was still conscious of it all happening, and then I just went somewhere else, but I don't know. Yeah, pretty liberating, profound. Also, my body was floating at some point, weightless, like no up or down, below. It was just all directions in a 3D sense, but also somewhere else. But I can't put it in words.
I'll share a bit. My dog, I forgot to put my dog away, so he was with me the whole time, and he kept like getting on top of me or to the side, so I couldn't go as deep, where I think I did, but different. So all I felt was like white tentacles or white light or something coming out of my head, coming out of everywhere. But the interesting part is that I feel very high. Like I feel very happy and very high. And that feels really nice. So that was good.
Hi. I think, am I frozen? No? Or people are frozen in my thing here? Okay. What do I have to share? I feel the thing that I would like, or the thing that I liked the most, and I've been experiencing it for maybe the last 2 processes that I've been having with myself. It is the feeling or the sensation that I am my heartbeat. It's almost as if it starts like, it might be at any pace, whatever pace that it is, but it's like I'm becoming one with it, and I'm swinging with it. And yeah, in this swing, there is nothing else happening, just the awareness and the sensation of being with this movement, which is entirely the heartbeat. And sometimes sometimes I get to experience what what my breathing is, how it is kind of coordinating or not so coordinating with the heartbeat. But it has been interesting to see that, and then to also allow myself to feel rhythm. There were some moments in the playlist today that I could really see, but like see from the feeling, as I was the feeling, that whatever beat was happening in the playlist was actually my heart. And my heart was pumping, and I was just that pumping at the same moment. And there was nothing around it. There was nothing behind it. It was just that. And it got me to observe a different layer of it, because before this, I think it's been like 2 months that I was really feeling the brain. And then now maybe moving into the heart. And something was interested in seeing finally, maybe from the body, or feeling from the body, what the connections, what the embodied sensation of blood, breath, and blood, blood, breath, and brain. the beautiful cocktail and mix that we have it inside through the sounds. I went through some personal processes that I'm going right now, and it was just as, in a sense, it was also just as interesting to see how there are 2 different stages that I've been experiencing, which is the very personal, contracted, but also the very expanded, not so personal one. And witnessing in between these stages my ongoing struggle to be like, how do I merge this two? How do I find this sense of harmony or balance inside to hold this two in a different way, or maybe just hold it in whatever it is. So the interesting question of time that was posed in the beginning, how do we hold time, is actually one that it puzzles me, because I've been a lot in the space time, a lot of in the multidimensionality aspect of the body and everything. So maybe going back to the heart and the heartbeat will help me get some answers as to how to hold this time, if it is not just the story of the human, what would be this heart that beats and tells a story of the earth, and what would be the conditionings to do so. Yeah, I also got the interesting insight, and it's also correlated to the conversation we were having yesterday regarding language and retrocausality and everything. Yesterday after the session, I finally got that science is not linear. It's also a mandala kind of thing. So understanding what essentialism, materialism, all of these theories are, this understanding is not just a linear understanding in the old sense of time. So if I see that as a mandala or something that is more correlated, there is less struggle or less causality to worry about. Like what comes after and what is the next step. So it's an interesting point also. And today I've also finally got that during the session today, how language is also causal, and it is very, it felt like I was just feeling in my body how it is related to time. And it's like I've been listening or hearing Pai say like, oh yes, one word after the other, it creates the sensation of time in the body. But then today it was like a different click. It was a click kind of from the inside, and how this is also holding a big paradigm within the body, a deep way of perceiving everything. And the scary thing, as in all paradigm shifts, at least for the human in me, is that not knowing how to hold this is interesting, or not knowing what will be the consequences of holding this differently is an interesting wondering. So maybe this is what I had to share. Thank you very much.
I want to share a bit. It's not a closing because there's a lot of time still. But just to help to hold. Yeah, there's always a lot happening. The year is about to end. And over here, it's actually going to be 3 days before the anniversary when the typhoon hit Palawan. Gra was there. So just to let you know, Gra, it's December 17, right? Oh yeah, it's 2 days. So there's a lot passing through the island right now in circularity. I'm feeling a lot happening globally. Like usually I do, but there's something about like this week, this month, and this year. It probably doesn't mean anything. It probably means everything. But usually when it's being spoken, it's specific to this one moment. I'm going to go off track a little bit in relation to how I began what I shared earlier, which is very global. Going into my personal process, what's been coming to me lately are memories of what it was like to have come from there and then to arrive here, to come here, coming from there, whatever that space was that looked like an island and a time when there was no time and there was just a lot of space. And I'm sure you ask yourself the same question I ask. What's the point? The point doesn't need to be like a reasoning. Like, what's the point? What's the rationality? I don't put mind and logic usually to the point. But then there's always the deeper point. Like somehow something holds and anchors all of these. So we're having more and more discussions about the earth. Time belongs to the earth. And when we come here, there's a vibration of time. And there's something about that. When I first came back from my retreat 16 years ago, I had this illusion that it was going to be so easy. It's like, okay, I'm going to share this with people. It's going to be hard to talk about, but people will know, people will get it. And I thought, oh, it's just going to be a matter of months. And then like, there, quick, we've done it. We've created harmony in the planet. And that was 16 years ago. So obviously it wasn't just a couple of months. I think that's something that happens when our mind gets what we call spacey, because that's retrocausal. We're seeing ahead what actually is unraveled throughout a much larger space-time. So I had to really stretch out the journey so that I could look at this a lot more slowly and a lot more expansively, so that I could see more of the questions that actually come after the answers. The answers normally come before the questions. The questions really just help us to see the answers that are already there. Innerdance began as a complete construct. It was a big answer. It was like, here's an answer to the many problems. It's like a one answer, but it actually holds the key to the many problems. When I think about that, that was really practical in the beginning. I spent no money for 2 years. I lived alone, bothering no one. I didn't destroy the planet. I consumed nothing but what the earth gave. I lived in free energy. I was one with nature. And so Inner Dance is not a workshop. It was the manifestation of what it meant to live like that, to live in those conditions where there was harmony with the earth. So I'm really interested in this topic on what's the root of our fear. What's the root of our resistance? That's what I came across when I brought this energy. It's like, oh, it's not going to be that easy. We have to say goodbye to the many things that are magnetizing us, bringing us into states of conservation or conserving what is old, like old stories, old habits, old behaviors, old thoughts, old emotions, old memories. So I didn't really put effort into it. My mind really just started to travel across the world and the history of the world, where I just saw all of these patterns within the energy, speaking one thing through many things. And more and more we come closer to the root, the ground, the earth, but the root of the thing. And I don't want to say problem, but sometimes we could say that, like what's up, what's down, what's wrong, what's right, what's the point. This week, I can feel a lot of people, their attention is in this place in the Middle East where there's a bunch of men running around, manicured piece of earth, chasing one ball, 1 point, trying to kick the ball across this field. You can call it an energy field. You can call it like a field of grass, a field of competition, and it takes a lot of energy to coordinate that's happening somewhere in the desert. And like when we talk about humanity, one of the ways to call the human is the human race. And there's double meaning in the word, the human race. So somehow the root of the problem has something to do with competition. Like, it's not just us competing with other humans. We're competing against something. And time has to do with this competition. We can use these linguistic metaphors. We're racing against time. I think that's only partly true. I think we're racing within time. So there's something about the heartbeat and the breath and the brain waves that has something to do with this human race. So when you think about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, there's something about this linearity. Imagine like a line, and then you can either slow down or speed up. And when your heart beats faster, either through anxiety or excitement, it's almost like we're getting ahead. And then when like things slow down, it's like we either lag or in the other sense we catch up. So something starts to arrive at some kind of like point. We land in the point. When I think about control, I think what we're trying to control isn't what's happening now, because you never have control over what's happening now. What you have control is what's going to happen next. And what anxiety does often is to start to sequence events in our head in order to make sure that we experience reward and we escape stress. So some people, they have this talent of planning 10 steps. Some people can plan 20 steps, and you might have gone to one of those schools that makes you create like a 5-year, 10-year plan, or okay, well, how do you see yourself like 50 years from now? We want you to imagine that and stick with that plan so that it doesn't make sense to change and to create possibility, even though you may not have been seeing as much because you haven't really experienced the world yet 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. So there's something about the way we've constructed our minds and our realities that are reflecting in the body that's somehow racing against some foreseeable future. When I think about retrocausality, if retrocausality isn't just about time going backwards, that doesn't make sense to me. Time going backwards is still linear, right? It's like, okay, here you have the start and there you have the finish. And then when you have retrocausality, here's the finish, and then you go into the start. That's still a little bit too sequential to regard as the more objective understanding of how a world or a universe is constructed. The way it normally seems to happen within the innerdance construct is there seems to be like a web or a network of multiple realities that are all coexisting with each other. And when you land in a point, the way things got constructed, you actually usually land in a line. So that when you're seeing a point, what you see is a cascade of past and future laid out within a certain dimensionality that point is holding. So when I listen to the experiences of people, and I've been listening to tens of thousands of experiences of people, it feels like what's happening is the mind is starting to traverse the many lines, the many parallel lines. And then they're seeing all of these possibilities all at the same time, like cascading. And you can choose, you can literally choose any of those. I don't know exactly how we're going to do it, that we can choose multiple things at the same time. That's not easy to imagine because we've constructed a reality where you need to make a choice usually. And when you actually make multiple choices at the same time to really, really experience that, that's what's described as a psychosis or a schizophrenia or a multiple personality disorder or bipolar or autism, or you end up in really funny places when you are able to succeed in actually holding that. You're called like empathic, hypersensitive, and it's not a good thing. So I think going back to some of the things we shared yesterday about self-concept self-esteem and self-efficacy. There's something about the yellow chakra that is controlling things. The yellow chakra isn't just about the digestive system. The adrenal system is there. And, there's this really overused word that starts to stream towards the inner dance field, even though the inner dance actually came from the other side of the field, and the word is success. Like there's so much drive to succeed, and the thing is, what are we trying to succeed in? Because normally when there's a kind of success in a cosmopolitan modern system, you have to follow that up with further successes. You have to keep winning. So yesterday we talked about conceptual metaphors, where we borrow concrete experiences to arrive at abstract realities. And like one example of a conceptual metaphor is time is money. So you say, I'm spending time, where you're borrowing like a terminology that has to do with value exchange to describe how you're relating to time. One of the common metaphors that you would find in language, and because language structures the unconscious, it's about war. We hear this word a lot, like war, and this war isn't just happening outside. We're probably manifesting that because that's really how we're built. Like we're competing against something, and we're trying really hard not to lose, which means we're trying really hard to, if not to win, to at least stay even. And here we have then this sudden manifestation of a spiritual modality called inner dance that's built upon the very nature of losing. Like the moment you lose is the moment it's not about, you don't win. The moment you lose is the moment you find an equilibrium where you're liberated from having to win. The yellow chakra is really wounded in that way. When you look at the blockages of the yellow, when you talk about power, power is about, do you have power, or can you do it? Are you able to do it? And a lot of people, when they decompress the yellow, the actual wounding in the yellow isn't so much, I can't do it, I'm too weak. People are releasing the energy there because they're so filled with, I don't want to do it because I'm feeling like I have to do it, because I'm being forced to do it, and it doesn't belong to my nature or the nature of anything for certain things to be done for the sake of doing it when it doesn't actually need doing. And I think if we were to destroy this planet, it would come somehow from this built up energy of having to do something out of habit, trying to have more, to do more, to be more, when in fact we're somehow perfect as we are already. And that belongs within sacred simplicity. That's the root of what the inner dance is. So this is easy to take in conceptually. It sounds interesting. It sounds amazing because it's understandable. But the thing is, the operations that are holding this in a genetic DNA cultural, anthropocentric memory is, this is in the body. This Darwinian system, like one of the reasons why we're actually trying so hard isn't even to succeed. It's sometimes to survive. It's like, I hope I'm still here tomorrow, because I'm just coping. I'm literally just hanging by a thread, and you know? So I think in the coming years, there's going to be this mood called emergency, you know, something drastic, something is dangerous that's happening. And when I hear the word emergency, what I see is emergence, and emergency is an emergence seeing. But you need to really hold certain conditions for you to see the 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 point within the crisis, the critical point. Um, one of the videos we shared was this lady who was talking about the energy of gold. There's so much value in gold in earth, but were you to look at the real nature of gold, how do you make gold? That's been the philosopher's stone quest that would bring about immortality and so on and so forth. I think it's easy to create gold. Gold is a color. So to create gold, what you do is you take yellow, which is power and agency and action, which can also be reaction and thus emotion and motivation and needs. To bring it into purity, you mix yellow and white. That's literally how you create gold. It's so simple. You want to create alchemy, you just mix yellow with gold. So healing the yellow is for me a sacred economic. And I was very clear about this when I lived alone, and then when I came back to the earth, because it's so simple, I was given this task or told about this one rule, and I've tried to stay with that. I've not always succeeded because it's easy to lose it. But the rule was simple. The instructions were: don't ever give anything you can't freely give, and don't receive anything that's not freely given. Otherwise, there's something hiding within that transaction that's debt. You know, that's an obligation. It means it's not freed. There are attachments, there are entanglements there. And when you go into that, you actually get imprisoned or enslaved, which is the root of addiction. So I think we're liberating ourselves somehow. We're you know, we were born in it. Like, oh, I owe her my life. They gave me my life, and yet I still need to be a certain person. And how much was it given freely? Life. You know, is there a payment for that? If you read the book Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein, he talks about the money system, where the money system is based on interest bearing debt. So even just weaving within the money system, you already owe because of fiat currency and all that. It's very hard to keep within that. And I'm not against money. I'm interested in money. I'm interested in new money, how, you know, the gift economy could be transformed somehow, and that you could deserve to receive once you find a way to just keep giving, that something circulates because you got it. You brought a clear yellow, which is gold, with bright blue. And when you mix yellow and blue, what you have is the green. So you got it. Sacred economics, like what you give to others, you receive because you know, liberated the resistances of love. So it's ridiculous, this message innerdance carries, because we live in a world where you're not supposed to lose. You don't want to end up like a loser. You don't want to end up losing. But this seems to be the illusion. It's the Darwinian illusion that the strongest will survive, you know. But what is death and what is life? So yesterday we talked about postmodernism, post-colonialism. There's a lot of other posts. What comes after. I think the inner dance reveals a post-Darwinian age, which will be the age of not competing. Like when you take this word WAR, and when you look at that on the mirror, what you have is the reverse. You have RAW, WON, NOW, OWN. Everything's upside down. Everything's in reverse. Like we really constructed the world. It's about waking up and going to battle, going to war again. It's like, do we really want that? Is that what we want? Is that okay? So at one point we have to drop out. We have to drop out of something. And that's going to be a conversation about holding a strong boundary, using the same energy that does help you to let go of the boundaries, because it is an illusion that you can get hurt. That is something for you to decide, because you do see people laying down with pain, and then the pain simply deconstructs in a split moment, just when they find the right conditions of laying down their arms, closing their eyes and saying, okay, do it, whatever, just beat me up, fuck me over, like, slap me in the face. I don't care. I'm energy. I'm creating this reality, and I take responsibility. But the programming is, it 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 spreads across, it traverses, it's everywhere. You turn on media and everything is about shining and coming out on top, and hierarchies, and someone's always going to look better and going to have more. And yet we know in many parts of the world it's it's ridiculous how little people have, and yet we keep going on with this model. So we build in a dream. I think it's everyone's dream. I think we've been doing this dream for how long? You can call it the Elysian Fields. You can call it paradise, Eden. It doesn't matter if you look at it as New York City or Singapore or Metro Manila or Berlin or Krakow or something. Someplace in Bangladesh. I think we're all just trying to make something better, but we've got it all wrong. We're so interested in these words like progress, development, and then when you look at this inner dance process that looks at not progress but regress, going back to the child, going back to one of the challenges is this. I belong to the Southeast, and in the Southeast, where westernization didn't really do so much, there's not so much to unlearn, because we never actually achieved learning to begin with. It's so dysfunctional. So there's something easier in my personal path that I see, where I only need to go into one direction. But then when I spend time with people who are coming from successful first world nations, it becomes a little bit harder, because they need to do two things. They need to unlearn, thank you, Mick, and then they need to relearn. And so is that something that needs to happen one at a time, or do we find a way to allow that to happen simultaneously? So this comes close to what we're working on as an inner dance project, like holding music, holding space, holding holding the time so that we can hold both surrender and intelligence, the masculine sense of power and will, and the feminine sense of release and embrace and acceptance. And this is something new. No one knows this. I'm groping myself, just using everything that might have come up the last decade or more, and that's not actually that much to have gathered insight. I'm still quite overwhelmed at the amount of work that needs to be done, that brings this to schools, families, doctors, and I'm having to really focus next year on that. Systemically speaking, I'm considering just kind of going into a cave and working in those, because it's demanding. But I want to grant you is, don't be scared to dream of a better way, and don't be unclear with the fact that where you're headed is something simple. So how could you fail if that actually becomes the point? In richer countries, usually the goal is abundance, to have more. When you come to these simpler areas in the world, the people are okay with sufficiency. Is there enough? And once you have enough, you can free up your psychic energy and your yellow chakra so that you can do what needs to be done, a lot of which are interesting and would help the planet and would help you and would help others, because you're liberating and you're freeing up a lot of what's entangled. So think about indebtedness a lot. That this is something I had to consider a lot, that we are freeing up ourselves from debt. Like when I used to do a lot of one-on-one work in places like Singapore and Malaysia, and then there would be these old women who would have cancer and are depressed. All I do is sit there, and I could do an innerdance or not, but I would say you don't need to worry about what other people are thinking right now. And then I would sit there and I'll just watch the tears fall. It's like, are you sure? Is this really okay? Like, especially from Asiatic cultures where indebtedness is just so huge. The Chinese, the Indians, the Koreans, the Philippines, we live in shame societies, and so debt is actually quite huge. This is something we need to learn from our Western counterparts that are really good at holding boundaries. Like, okay, I need to really take care of myself right now, because then I can take care of others later. Whereas other people are coming from parts of the world that are really good at taking care of others, but don't know how to work in themselves. So we don't know when to say yes and when to say no. And probably the answer is always going to be the paradox. We say both at the same time. That's called yo, or ness. What I do know is a brain state is called mu, which is me and you. Mu is a brain state. Mu is an innerdance brain state that allows for the mirror neuron to go into a much deeper dimensionality. It's an alpha wave that happens somewhere around the motor cortex when we go into dream state, and when you start to go interdimensional, that's when Mu arises. So for me, Mu isn't just the lost continent in the Pacific, Lemuria, the continent Mu. Mu is me and you. And I think that's when the war stops, when we take that much responsibility. I think it's the scariest thought, actually, to take responsibility for everything, to open your media and say, okay, this is all me. I'm creating this. I take responsibility. And then there's something higher than that first step, which should be, I can take responsibility for something better if I wanted to. So how do you operate that vibrationally? How do you create a study process that actually finds a way to systematize that. So thank you for staying here, because this is what you've been sitting on. And years later, you will nod your head, okay, I think I'm starting to get it. All the parts seem to be coming together. You won't get there if you don't do it, though. You need to dive. You need to just somehow go into it, to love and to serve and to bring healing to this space, because that's what's good. And even if there's a risk of losing, risk it. It's good. It's how it's supposed to be. It's part of the design. So I think a lot was spoken earlier about a different way of relating with the earth. We talk about climate change a lot, and the truth is the real climate change is happening inside the body. The real climate change, the real change in temperature holding magnetism, sound, and information is happening inside your body. You are Earth undergoing a climate change. And when you change the climate, what you alter is time, the experience, the perception of time. So thank you for listening. Thank you for formulating. I think we're getting to the bottom of it, the root and the point. I thought I wanted to share that because I was feeling that a lot during the session and the day and the week. Thank you.
Okay. I think there's something that came up for me that was interesting in the sharings, and that came up, in everyone's sharing, in the what is the feeling that Earth has? It's a ball, it's a circle, it's a like rounded shape. So this feeling of floating, does it feel like it's floating, and does it have senses to feel its own body, or to feel? This is clearly like from a human perspective, because we don't know how things feel themselves. And it has, when you're a circle, there's no highs, there's no low, there's no above or below. Everything can be a high or a low, or any sense can happen. So a round by itself, or a cycle, can be an infinite, like this, or within the infinite sign as well. So yeah, what are the senses of the earth, and how is Earth also feeling itself in its own rhythm? If we look into all the sounds and that happen on Earth, where there's an infinite playlist happening, is there like, how can all of these sounds come into one way for the Earth to hear itself, when we have also just in our body this playlist happening? Am I aware of my heartbeat creating the drum, the rhythm? Am I aware of the breath that comes up and down all the time? If I really take the time to listen, my digestion also is happening when I take steps. Every moment there's this playlist being created. So how can the earth, and is it possible for earth to listen to itself, and how would it be from its own ears to see the playlist that she is creating, that it's creating by itself, and yeah, there's like, actually I think I have more questions than anything to share, in the sense of holding, the earth is itself is also a point. And so how does it feel to float in the universe, and to have this motion happening and dance in between all the planets and around the sun, and having the moon that turns around you, and like how does it feels to be earth, actually. And so with the sharings that people gave, I was really like wondering and asking myself, what's the feeling of earth, if she can feel herself. But then as we are becoming the earth, what is it maybe at the moment that we're tapping into more and more, when we feel that our senses are changing, when synesthesia is happening, when we're having this traversing the mind, or transcending the like self-centered to ego-centered to like earth-centered perspective, and the shift in the paradigm that happens when we grow more in connectivity with the earth. So what does it mean to embody the earth? Not just through the human senses, but also just to embody the earth through what it lived and feels and is, just being actually. So yeah, we have 15 minutes. So we could take more sharings if anyone feels like sharing, or we could also close. Isa.
Hi.
Hi.
Part of the call because I was under my job obligations. Yeah, with the yellow chakra, boom, 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 boom. But yeah, the way I'm trying to connect with Earth is connecting to the animals, to the plants, and to the stones. And like the surface, in fact, the surface of the earth. I don't know, because that's what is seen. I don't know what's inside the earth. I mean, so really make a connection of love with nature. And I guess that when one feels oneself being nature, being not part of nature, but I guess the next step here and now, let's say, is feeling one is nature, the connection with the earth is done. That's the way I'm moving towards earth, besides working on opening the feet and all this, but the thing is nature. And at least one thing that's happening to me is that I am starting enjoying the nights a lot, being in the darkness. So not enjoying the nature to be seen, but also the nature that is not seen. And yeah, that's all I can say. It's a process, but it's calling. So whatever. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Maybe we can close if you feel like opening up your camera, unmuting, saying good morning, good evening, good night to each other. And we can continue the conversations in the group chat.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.